Lucky for Ollie, lucky for everyone really, he was already downtown. Ollie was down at the USS Constellation, the old historical sailing ship down in the harbor. He just hadn't been in a while and decided to go poke around. It's always a cool thing to visit. When all of a sudden, people started yelling and screaming and pointing. It seemed to be coming from up on deck. So Ollie, along with a bunch of other people, raced up the stairs because they were inside the boat, up to the deck, up to the surface. And there they saw the people pointing, and Ollie followed their, fingers. And on the other side of the inner harbor, it was a very strange sight, but one that seemed, Ollie thought, kind of in his wheelhouse. There was a giant pickle, wreaking havoc and scaring people. Now, Ollie's fought a lot of things that are the size of buildings. This one was, it was about 2 stories tall, which is way too big for a pickle. A manageable size for a monster. But it was kind of in a size range that Ollie hadn't really dealt with very often, with the possible exception of the robot taco. But even that was bigger than this. But still, the thing was making a menace of itself. As Ollie watched it, kicked the glass of one of the storefronts and broke the glass. It ran after a crowd of children yelling. If it had been smaller and less destructive, it almost would have been endearing, like a sports mascot. But it wasn't endearing. It was doing property damage and harassing people. I'll take a deep breath and realize that he needed to do something about it. So he ran to one of the workers, one of the sailors on the USS Constellation. Said, "I need your help. I need you to watch my things so that I can go and deal with that pickle." The sailor was confused, but said, okay. Sure. Now I handed the guy his camera, which he had brought in to take pictures of the boat, and his knapsack. He had his lunch. Oh, excuse me. And with that, Ollie leapt off the side of the boat into the water, because it was the quickest way to get there. And he swam across the harbor as fast as an octopus can swim, which is pretty fast. He surfaced on the other side, and the sailor said, "I got you, sir. I got your stuff." Ollie ran over and realized he didn't quite have a plan yet. But sometimes it's worth asking. So he ran up and said, "Hey, you pickle monster person thing. Knock it off." And the pickle completely ignored him. It carried on. What it was doing right then was turning over a trash can and shaking the trash out onto the street. And then it looked like it was trying to throw the trash can into the water, but it didn't have enough power, so it just sort of tossed the trash can to the side. Solidly antisocial behavior, in any case. I said, "I'm warning you. Cease and desist." But the pickle just ignored him, which was a problem, because Ollie didn't actually have a plan. Because how do you beat a pickle? If it was a giant slug, I could see getting a bunch of salt. If it was a giant ice cream, all I guess is he would just wait, or call in a bunch of children. But how do you defeat a pickle? Ollie thought of one of the usual things, because usually when there's a giant monster, it's being remote controlled somehow. So Ollie ran and dodged around it. And again, it wasn't really paying attention to him, so it wasn't like he had to dodge it attacking him. It seemed to be more or less on its own without paying much attention to its surroundings. Except that it was breaking trash cans and kicking windows. It was attacking, but it wasn't responding, I guess, That's what Ollie had observed. In any case, he didn't see any seams or doors or hatches or any way to get inside. He threw a couple of rocks at it, and it squished like a real pickle. It seemed to be lumbering back over toward one of the pavilions. Ollie took a gamble. He climbed up to the top level of the pavilion, and when it got within reach, he leapt onto the top of it. And it seemed for all the world to be an actual pickle. It was cold, salty, and vinegary. It was crispy in the way that a good pickle, can be crispy. Well, I tried to take a bite, and it tasted like a pickle. But the thing did not like that. Then it noticed Ollie. With a big shake, threw Ollie off into the bushes. Whatever it was strong, and it was a real pickle. Except it was also had arms and legs and was tearing up downtown. So I sat there in the bush and mused to himself. How do you defeat a pickle? What makes a pickle go bad? How do you ruin a pickle? And then someone standing next to him said, pickles get gross in the sun. Ollie hadn't entirely realized he was talking to himself out loud, but then he was glad he did. He said, wait, say that again? Pickles. You asked how a pickle gets bad. A pickle gets bad when you leave it out in the sun. It gets all soggy and weird. But of course the thing was already out in the sun. But that got Ollie thinking. Heat. Heat does make pickles go all limp and squishy and weird. And he had seen, on his way in that day, one of those big police lamps that they use sometimes at night. It was just over by the other pavilion. In fact, Ollie could see a couple of the big lamps. He ran over there and took a closer look, and they were halogen lamps. They'd be really hot. Ollie inspected it. It was on a diesel generator, so it was mobile. He looked around, and the police hadn't really arrived yet. So there wasn't anybody to ask. But when it comes to a monster destroying the inner harbor, Ollie said with a sigh, better to ask forgiveness than wait for permission. So he picked up the handle, and he rolled it over by the pickle. He fired at the generator. And he said, how am I going to get it to come? And then he remembered that it responded when he bit it. So he ran up behind the thing and took a chomp out of its back. It howled and turned, glared at Ollie. Wasn't sure how it was glaring. It didn't have eyes or a mouth or a nose, but Ollie could tell it was mad. It started to lumber toward him. Ollie darted over to the generator with the light on it, pretending like he was hiding. At the last second, when the thing was, 10 feet away, Ollie flipped the switch, and the lights came on. 7, 10, 15,000 watts of light and heat all at once. And the thing tried to power through, tried to get to Ollie, but it was too hot. It started to sizzle. It started to droop. It got real droopy. It seemed like it lost a big part of its internal structure because it just sort of slumped over. And the arms started to come loose. And the legs kind of dangled at a weird angle. It was still moving, but it wasn't able to walk anymore. It was just sort of writhing there on the pavement. Ollie climbed up and turned the lights down toward it because they were pointed sort of straight ahead before. And there more it sizzled and got droopy. Ollie ran over and he tugged on the arm, and it came out. And inside was a little electronic control board thing. The other arm was on the bottom side now, but Ollie tugged on the legs, and they had control boards too. And with 3 out of 4 limbs off, it stopped wiggling. Ollie pulled the other arm out, just for good measure. Stacked them all in a neat stack. He left the lights on, just in case. But it was done for. About then, the police finally showed up, including a detective that Ollie knew. She said, "Ollie, what's going on here?" I said, "Well, Officer Mendez, I'm going to leave you to figure out what's going on, but the situation's resolved. You have one of our lights and a giant pickle and some arms and legs. I'm going to need a little more explanation than that, Ollie." I said, "Well, then, I think you owe me a cup of coffee." And that is the story of Ollie and the giant pickle.